Hey all you cool cats and kittens, thanks for joining me on my first video, so bear with me. Today we are doing the mountains, and this one's really easy guys because it's basically just coloring with thread. We're going to be doing a satin stitch just in a couple different directions, diagonal and then horizontal across here on the top. So let's get into it because I think you guys are really going to like this. So here's our colors to start with. As you can see, I've got these little cardboard bobbins that I've made just with two little cuts on either side, and that's to put that thread in. You can also always just wrap it around the card that I gave you already. So like I said, this is all going to be satin stitch. We're going to start going diagonally, first one direction and then the other, and we're going to keep going back and forth through each of these layers of mountains so they don't blend into each other. Now, if this big mountain up front feels overwhelming, you are welcome to start with some of the smaller ones and then come back to him. Once you've got some more confidence in your satin stitch, that's fine. Just keep aware of your diagonal. So in our kit, we're going to have some snips or scissors so you can cut your floss. We're going to have your array of floss colors. That's the green, and then here is our dusty. They're going to be on your card in line. We're going to start with our darkest, most vibrant tones and move into the duskier ones, no matter what color scheme you have. So I'm just going to pull this thread out here and show you that an embroidery floss is actually 6 strands. I would suggest for this that you do 2. I'm going to do 3 here just to start. I'll show you just to make this go a little bit faster so I can record it all. Get a little knot, just snip it off. Now let's talk threading. I have never found a needle threader helpful. I find that using spit and my thumbnail or even my teeth to flatten that out is the easiest way to do it. I also don't like to have my loose end of thread, so I actually fold my thread all the way in half, as you can see here, smoothing it out again with my thumbnail. And once I've got these 2 ends, I'm just going to go ahead and loop around, do a simple knot just to stop this from pulling through while we're embroidering. And then I'm going to show you how I do that, actually a double knot, just to make sure it doesn't pull through when we're using linen or something that has a little bit of a larger weave. Just use my thumbnail to push that second knot right up on top of the first one, so we actually have 2 knots on top of each other instead of one little one. All right, let's get going. So I like to start with some guidelines so I don't mess up and change that diagonal as I work across. And as you can see, I didn't like that second one I put in. This is the great thing about linen and embroidery. You can just pull it right back out. So then I'm just going to go side by side, starting at the top, and on the bottom, or whichever side you've already worked on, you want to make sure that you're going into the same hole that you came out of on the other side. We really don't want to leave any white space between these mountains. That'll ruin our whole illusion. So just working back and forth, top to bottom, keeping on that same diagonal all the way across here. It's okay if it's a little bit bumpy. Mountains are bumpy, that's fine. So let's talk about what happens when you are done with your piece of thread and you've come to the end. Ideally, it is much harder to tie knots near the edge of your hoop than the middle, so try to avoid what I'm doing if possible. But what I'm doing here is I'm basically just working through an old stitch or maybe a couple, putting my needle through that loop and then pulling it all back through. This doesn't have to be pretty, and if you're not wearing it, it's probably not going to get a lot of wear and tear, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Just want to make sure that it is solidly attached to the back. So I showed you just a couple more mountains there, and then while I had some of this blue left over, I went ahead and started working on the sky. This is going to go pretty fast from here on because I want you guys to see how this looks, but all I'm doing is that same back and forth. I put in my little guidelines here so I can fill in my satin stitch. Here's my little pupper keeping me company. And I'm just going back and forth on those mountains, filling them in. And again, if I've got some left over, I'm adding in some to the sky. The sky is going to be much more abstract, so you really don't need to worry about it being as perfect with your satin stitches as organized. You just really want to keep them all horizontal. And you can add and blend those blue colors or greens however you like. But I'll show you in a little bit once we get to the actual sky how I finish that off. On your patterns, I've drawn in an actual sun. You can use that for where you're actually going to put a little sun if you want, or you can do a little sunset actually coming up over the mountains. I just really wanted that to be an idea of where to start your brightest and lightest colors from, and then you can blend from there. So I'm starting with this peach going in here, just going back and forth Unlike the mountains where we want every stitch to land on the same line, we actually want to not do that. Now, while we want to make sure all the stitches stay horizontal, we want to make sure those ends are really varied, so they're not ending up side by side with the stitch on top or below it. That's how we're going to get something that's really nice and soft. I'm just finishing this off with a little bit more yellow and peach through those brightest, sunniest places. Guys, I'm so excited to see you make these. Please tag me on Instagram at the Sailor's Kid. I really want to see them. I'm just going to show you how to finish off your hoop. This is super easy. You can either use a hot glue gun, or of course you can sew it with your needle and thread, because you are awesome at that now. You're just going to fold all of your corners in. If you want to put a little round piece of cardboard back there, you can, if you want it to be able to lie flat. If you can still see some of the pattern around the edges, that's actually water soluble, so you can just run it under some nice warm tap water, let it dry, and you are all set.